And we're live. Hello, friends. So I'm excited to start today. Let me share my screen. Here we go. And share this to here. There we go. Okay, so I don't pay attention to the YouTube. So if you want to comment there, be my guest, but I will never see it. You will want to come to the Discord. And yeah, office hours, this is your opportunity to ask me any question and I will do my very best to answer. I may not always answer to your liking, but I will do my best. So yeah, I give priority to people who are actually in the Zoom meeting. So come to kcd.im/office hours. Which will redirect you to my website here. And you can join the Zoom call here. And if you don't want to talk in the Zoom call or be in the Zoom call, that's fine too. You can ask in Discord and I will answer those as I can. I believe that, yeah, okay, this is just some discussion after the last meeting. So yeah, I've only got a question that I got in an email, as well as a question here. So I don't have a lot, so maybe it'll be a short meeting today. But yeah, any questions from the Zoom call right now? Okay, feel free to interrupt me as we go. You get priority being in the Zoom call. The question that I got in an email, I did not get their yes or no on whether they are okay with me revealing that they are the one who asked the question. So I'm just going to show you some of the stuff that they asked. So they built this select compound component, and then they gave me an example of some of the code that they are trying to decide for the customizability of the way that things are rendered, the way things look. And so they have two options here, one that has like a render prefix for these, and also just styles that could be applied. So it could be either style or CSS are the options that they presented. So for me, pretty much anytime I see a render prefixed prop, that just says to me that you probably don't want to do that. One of the nice things about compound components in general is the ability to have a little bit of control over what is rendered. So in this case, it looks like you probably want to have ULs and LIs just for accessibility reasons. And so, and in particular with a select, like that's what you want to render. And so, yeah, maybe you don't want to necessarily give them the flexibility to render whatever they want, because yeah, having ULs and LIs is what you want to have rendered. But you could have these select item. Well, so the select would render the UL, and you could have some like prop that says here's the additional props on the UL, or you just forward those props on or something. Or you can have a select UL or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. So I'm kind of beating around the bush there. Let me just say, I wouldn't bother writing this. What I would do instead is choose between one of two options. The first option is Downshift. This is the library that I wrote years ago that exposes a render prop API, and it works great and people love it and I love it. I think it's awesome. But even better than the render prop API that it exposes is the hooks API. So use select right there. Yeah, so this is all included as part of Downshift. And this is what I'd recommend using. Just use this and not bother writing this. Or you can choose to do reach UI or reach.tech right here. And they have a combo box that you can use instead. And I just think their solution is also like really good. So I don't know. I wouldn't bother writing it. But if you want some inspiration, you can look at what they've done. I rarely see a render prefix prop as being the optimal solution. Yeah, that pretty much it. Yeah, that's. I mean, there are some libraries that do this. I think that React Select does a form of this where rather than a render thing where you call that or you provide a function for when this particular element is going to be rendered, and then you just call that. What they do is you provide a component that they mount for you and pass props and stuff. That's called component injection. I've never been a fan of that API. I think it's kind of confusing. Like, okay, so which of these props is coming from the component that I'm passing it to, and which are or how do I add additional props based on like the parent that's rendering all of this stuff. So between component injection and render props like this, I prefer render props. But I wouldn't even do render props. I would what it looks like is you're trying to manage or expose some state as well as some layout, but then you're having problems because you're in charge of the layout. Now, if somebody wants to customize it, you have to expose a special API for that. And that just makes things more complicated. So that's why I really prefer Downshift's approach of we're just in charge of the logic and you take care of all the layout. Or with the combo box from Reach UI, they take the compound components approach and they're in charge of the layout, but I don't think that they give you as many options on, well, they give you options for styling, but I think they go about it through classes and stuff. And for like individual compound components for the elements that need to be rendered. So for this render selected and you've got an input and stuff, selected style, they just say, no, you just render this combo box input and you can provide it additional prompts and stuff. So that's another approach, but yeah, I would just do the hook. I don't know. Anyway, hopefully that's sort of interesting, and good luck to you on that. Okay, so yeah. How do we join the office hours on Discord? Omar is wondering. You're there. This is the Discord. Omar, if you want to join the Zoom, then there's that link there. If you just want to watch the video, the live stream, then there's that one right there. Yeah, and you're here. Hello, Omar. Good. So 9S, and I think this is, yeah, Mithi. Hi there, Mithi. I'm wondering about articles on how to write clean, maintainable React code. Yeah, so I would say that writing clean React code is highly subjective. I wouldn't say it's a waste of time. It really depends on what you're building. Like if you're just hacking together a weekend project, then yeah, who cares like if it's maintainable. But if you want to write something that is maintainable, then yeah, you should be mindful about that. Unfortunately, because it's highly or subjective, I don't know why I want to say suggestive, but subjective, you're going to not find many articles that agree. And so you'd have to just hope you landed on the one that worked and worked for what you were trying to do. I have not written any articles like this exactly. I kind of hope that the what I teach through Epic React kind of communicates that, and the examples that I provide, like with the bookshelf app and stuff. Yeah, for me, it's I've never really tried to teach how to write maintainable code directly, just because it's difficult to put that into like training material. I can often look at code and give you an idea of like, oh, like here are the problems you're going to have with this approach. But I could spend like years looking at different code examples because there are just so many different ways to do things. Yeah, so what I prefer instead is like, hey, let's build an app together. Let's build the bookshelf app and I'll do it in a maintainable way. and hopefully you take away some of those principles. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know of any articles where it's like, here's how you write maintainable, clean React code. Yeah, I haven't read any articles like that. Discuss what differentiates well-written React code over a poorly written one. I don't know. Sometimes people will ask me in office hours, like, here's what I've written. What do you think? And I'll pick it apart and stuff. But yeah, it's hard to talk maintainability from a general standpoint. It's easier to talk about it from like specific examples. There are just so many different pits of problems that you can run into. And so, yeah, trying to sum that up in a single article would be very difficult. I feel like there was something else I was going to mention about that. I do try to talk about like different software principles, but that's always more abstract. Like I've got the AHA programming article and stuff like that. Yeah, and so like you try to apply that to your code. But I think what you're looking for is for like concrete, and I don't have anything like that. Yeah, sorry, nothing for you there. Sorry. Okay, have I checked out Headless Ui? Yes, Headless. I'm not sure what. Oh, this is Tailwind, right? Yeah, Tailwind, Headless UI. Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked into it deeply, but yeah, I did notice that they mention Downshift in their blog, which is pretty sweet, inspired by Downshift. Downshift wasn't the first Headless UI, not the tech, but the concept. It wasn't the first headless user interface software or a React library. The first one that I'm aware of is React Motion. Whoops. Man, that LogRocket blog, they are content marketing like crazy. It's they have so many blog posts on so many things, and some of them are good. So it's pretty cool. Yeah, so this is the first time I ever saw a headless UI kind of component where we'll manage all of your logic and you manage what's displayed based on the state of that logic. This was the first like render prop or whatever. And when they introduced it, it was like, what the heck is this? And so yeah, things have evolved. But yeah, like they've still got Bower support, which blows my mind. When was the last time that? Yeah, November 2019. So they're not, I don't know how maintained this is anymore. But yeah, anyway, this didn't directly inspire Downshift, but yeah, it did a little bit. I actually tell the origin stories of Downshift back in, I think it was I recently saw it. It was episode 21, I think, of React podcast, the React podcast. So you can go listen to that if you're curious. But yeah, so I am Headless UI is just a evolution of this idea, and they've got React and Vue support, which is cool. So good for them on that. And I haven't really looked into it too much deeper than that. So yeah, Omar, if you want to share your screen, feel free, go ahead, and I can help you with that. You have a question?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks, Kent. Let me try and share my screen here real quick. So I joined the office hours last week. I don't know if you remember. I told you I mentioned that I was submitting an assessment for a job that I'm trying to get. This is working with the GitHub API, specifically with the Gists API.
Yeah, I remember this.
And
you were talking about you had like a bunch of requests that you wanted to make. You want to make fewer of them. Is that right?
Yes, correct. So I'm getting a weird error here. Maybe it's my shallow understanding of how to use React and how to call APIs with it. But basically, I have this app component which is rendering error boundary and then the gist data is basically what decides the logic. Basically, it first calls the fetch user gests, which is an API file that I have, which calls GitHub, and then gets the gists. Once it gets the gists, it will then decide if there's an error, it will send it to the error boundary. Otherwise, it will map over the gists and then call gist card. Gist card, sorry, let me move this here. Gist card then will make another API call to fetch all the forks of the gists, and then render the rest of the gist. If there's forks, render it. If not, then render the gist without its forks. But I'm getting this weird error on my app saying that basically it's you cannot, like, it's kind of like memory leak. And sorry, just let me remember exactly what the basically, you know when you assign the dependency array of yeah, there it is. It says, warning, cannot perform a React state update on an unmounted component. So I'm not sure how to fix it. Like, I tried, but I'm not sure how to go about debugging it.
Yeah, so I know exactly what's going on. And it looks like you are taking Epic React. Lots of this code looks very familiar to me. So
yes,
that's
I
cool.
based it on your course, definitely. Yes.
Yeah, and that's great. So I'm guessing that maybe you missed or you haven't gotten to the part where we deal with this error. It's in I think it's in advanced hooks. Let me see if I can find it here really quick. And I'll explain it to you as well, but I just want you to have this as a reference point here.
Do you still want to look at the code, or should I stop sharing?
Yeah, you can stop sharing. I know what's going on.
Okay. Thank you.
So here, let me just check. Yeah, okay, here it is. So it's exercise 2, and I'll share my screen now. Exercise 2 of Advanced React Hooks workshop. And let me put a link to that in Discord. And it's extra credit 3. So we create this safe dispatch hook. It's kind of a workaround to this problem, but yeah, here's the state update on unmounted component indicates a memory leak. So let me describe what's happening here. So I'll go to extra credit 2 before we solve this problem, and I'll show you that we can reproduce the same error here. So if I try to go to Pikachu and then I unmount the component, then that's weird. Let's try that again. Oh, you know what? This is production mode. Let me get this running locally. You won't get that that same warning in development. So here we go. Boy, cannot wait until well, until never. Who knows when we'll get faster development environment for Create React app. Probably never. Okay, here we go. So exercise 2, we'll go to extra credit 2. So right before we actually solve this problem, and then I go Pikachu, I unmount the component, then we're going to get the warning. So, and that's the exact same warning that you had. So what's going on here is when I say, hey, I want to go get Charizard, then a request will be made, and then I say unmount the component. So we remove it, but that request is still being made and we're still getting the response back. And so when it finally does come, and because of that, even though the component's been removed from the page, there's still some code that relies on that component. And so that component is hanging around in memory. Even though React is like, I don't care about it anymore, the DOM doesn't care about it anymore, because we have that asynchronous function that's still waiting for something to happen. That creates a closure that's going to capture all of the variables and everything, like all the objects, even if they're like megabytes worth of objects, those are going to hang out because we have this asynchronous code that's waiting to get called again. So when it finally does come back, and we say, okay, that function gets called, we trigger the state update, and I'll show you specifically which function that is. It is in this run function right here. Nope, sorry. Come on. Here it is. Yeah, so it's this function right here. So we fire off the request, and this function right here is like, I'm just hanging out waiting for this to respond. And so when it does come back, then we call this dispatch, which is going to call into React code and ultimately call into our async renderer. But React, when you call dispatch, it's going to say, before it does anything, it's going to check, is the component that's associated to this reducer, is that component still mounted? And if it's not, then that means that you didn't clean up after yourself when this component gets unmounted. And so I know that because you didn't clean up after yourself, that means that even though I don't care about the component anymore, some of your code does. And so all of the code within this hook and all of the code within here, all of that, the memory that's been allocated for this data is still hanging out in memory. And so therefore, I know that like you have a potential for a memory leak because that code, that all of that data, all that memory should be freed up by now, because I said I don't care about it anymore. I've gotten rid of it out of the DOM, so that should be gone. But because you're calling dispatch, I know that it's not gone because you wouldn't be able to call dispatch otherwise. And so I'm going to give you a helpful warning to let you know that, hey, you didn't clean up after yourself. And so it's possible that you could have a memory leak. And what that means is, or the problem that can create is, let's say we had like 5,000 of these and we're adding them and removing them like rapidly all over the place. If you don't clean up after yourself, then your memory starts with like, okay, here's 3 megabytes, then, oh, now we've got 6, now we've got 12, and now we've got like 30, and it just keeps on growing. And because you're not cleaning up after yourself, it grows forever. Now, it's not a big deal for us practically in this situation, because once this code runs, then nothing else cares about the data in here, and it does get removed ultimately. Once that function's done, it's like, okay, garbage collect, everything's fine. So practically in our situation, it doesn't make a big difference, but it can. And so that's why React just says, like, by default, if you call dispatch or set state or whatever on a component that's been unmounted, I'm going to let you know, because one, that doesn't do anything. You can't update state on a component that doesn't exist anymore. It's just, so React does nothing other than give you the warning. And then two, you could have a memory leak issue. And so that's why the warning shows up. And so there are a couple ways to solve this problem. The best way, because we're making an HTTP call, the best way for us to solve this problem would be to actually cancel the request. And with using the fetch API, you have an abort controller and this would be the best way to solve this problem, is to use an abort controller to cancel this request. And here, I'll share that in here. So that does complicate things a little bit for the way that you're constructing things, because now you have to create the abort controller, put it in like a ref or something, and then in the cleanup of your, like a use effect or something, you could say return and then abort controller dot oh, what is it called? Now I can't remember. Abort, I think it's what it's called. Yeah, abort, or it would probably be a ref, so current dot abort or something like that.
Abort, I think. Yeah, I think so. I've seen that.
Yeah, so you would do that in a cleanup. The problem is JavaScript promises are not cancelable. You cannot cancel a JavaScript promise. And so even with this abortion of the promise, all of the chained promises thereafter will still get called. They'll just get called on the error side. And so here in the error, you'll have to check, is the error an abort? Then, okay, that's fine. I won't care about it, and I'll just propagate that error. And pretty much every promise on the chain will have to handle that. I hate this so much. It's the worst, but it is the way that promises were made. There's this bit of a history on why promises don't support cancellation. What would be really nice is if you could just say, here's my promise, and then just say promise cancel. That would be great. And then it says, oh, okay, let's just ignore everything on this promise. We will never call these functions. We'll just get rid of them. We don't care about them. That would be nice, but that's not a thing. You can't do that for various reasons in the specification. So abort controller is the best way to solve this problem. The nice thing about using an abort controller is it tells the browser there's a request that's coming back. Just ignore it. Don't do anything with it. If you don't abort it, then even if you say, oh, like, I don't care about this response or anything, the browser still needs to handle that response. It needs to parse the headers and all of that stuff to create the response object. And so that in practical terms, that doesn't really matter that much, but it's just a shame that you run into that situation like that the browser is just doing this extra work that you don't care about. There's an alternative opinion on that where some people say, well, you're kind of priming the browser's cache. And if the cache headers are set properly, then if somebody decides, oh, actually, no, I do want to go get that, make that request or whatever, then the response will be more readily available. So there are kind of two schools of thought on that. But anyway, those are some things to think about when we're talking about like abort controllers and stuff. Regardless of what you end up doing, you hold on one second. I've got kids who forgot that dad isn't available when he's working. One second. All right. They need to remember that unless somebody's bleeding, dad's working now, but it's fine. I love working from home. I'd much rather be interrupted by my kids than by a coworker who just wants to tell me about the game last Friday or whatever. Anyway, so at the end of the day, you need to make sure that you don't call dispatch when a component's been unmounted, whether that be having some special logic for, was this aborted? All right, sweet. Let's just not call dispatch then. Or if you do what we do in this extra credit, which is to add a safe dispatch little hook. And I'll let you explore that on your own time. I'm not going to go through it with you right now. But basically, all it amounts to is having a special hook that keeps track of whether the current component is mounted. And if it, whether it is or not, it gives you a variable that you can check, say, is it mounted? And if it's not, then you don't call dispatch. And that's our solution in this one. And that way we get like browser caching and everything. So we don't cancel the request, but we also make sure that the dispatch isn't called. Yeah, so this is more of a sidestep to the problem than a solution. It's actually more of just saying, hey, React, stop giving me this warning, because it really changes nothing about the behavior of this function is still hanging out in memory, and its closure is keeping all that data. All of that will still be in play, and so you're not going to actually solve the problem that React is warning you about. But like I said at the beginning, in our case, it doesn't really matter that much because we're not like rendering 1,000 of these. There's not a ton of data in here that needs to be cleaned up anyway. So if that were the case, like if you're like, no, this is really important, we cannot have this stuff hanging out in memory, we need to cancel that as soon as the component's unmounted, that's when you definitely want to reach for an abort controller, because when you abort the request, then the promise is immediately rejected and you can get all of that stuff cleaned up right away. So If that was really important to you, then that would be the right solution. And frankly, that's probably the right solution most of the time, which is why, but it's really annoying to have to implement. And that's where it's really nice to have a library like React Query. I keep on bringing this up. Everybody, stop writing your own HTTP logic. I only write it in the workshop to show you how to do it. But then we also use this for more than just HTTP. We use it for general asynchrony state management later in the Bookshelf app. But if you're doing HTTP stuff, like server cache sort of stuff, then React Query is really what you want. And it has a promise cancel right here. Yeah, manual cancellation. So, oh no, that's manual. We want automatic. Here we go. So with React Query, you can have your abort controller within this function here. You do the signal, what's it, you make your promise with fetch, because fetch is the only thing that supports this abort controller thing. And you pass that signal along for your request, and then you say promise.cancel, and you just monkey patch that onto the promise. This is not spec, there's no promise.cancel, but React Query understands that, and it will say, oh, okay, you gave me a query that has a cancel on the promise. And so I know that if this component's unmounted, I will call cancel, which will result in controller abort getting called, and everything gets cleaned up right away. So this is what I would suggest doing, Omar, for your specific situation is, I mean, if you've got the time for it, for the evaluation that you're doing right now, I would switch over to React Query for all of these requests. And only use the use async hook if you want to have something else that kind of helps tell you what the current state of the promise is. Because yeah, otherwise, yeah, React Query is just the bomb. So yeah, does that answer your question, Omar?
It does, yes. Let me just kind of summarize what you advised me to do. Either I use the hook to check on the component if it's mounted or unmounted, and then to call dispatch or not, or I'm going to use the abort controller, which is the harder path, or just to check on any memory leaks. And then if I switch to React Query, it'll be simplified, and I can cancel the calling of the API, right? The HTTP.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, you got it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kent. It's much clearer now. Appreciate your time.
Good. Absolutely. Thanks for the question. That was a fun one to go through. Okay, Tony is asking, or anybody else in the Zoom call really quick, have a question? Feel free to interrupt me. All right, Tony is asking, I work on a code base that's a few years old that puts all of its server state in Redux. Very common, definitely for projects that are a few years old. Do you think it would be a good idea to migrate to React Query? Most of the code is React classes, but we're slowly converting to hooks. How would you test a component that makes an API call after some user interaction if there's no UI change as a result of the API call? The component doesn't make the API call directly, but makes a callback. Should I just check that the callback is called correctly? Okay, so two questions here. The first one, so any app that's working today and doesn't need to be changed, don't change it. Just leave it the way that it is. But eventually you're probably going to have some bugs in there and stuff that you need to fix, or maybe like you're actively maintaining this project, and that's when you need to start thinking about, okay, let's talk about the active or the long-term maintainability of this. We need to add new features. We're fixing bugs a lot. What's the best approach for us to do that in a sustainable way? And I would suggest that you're much better off with React Query than you are with Redux server cache soup. It's just a lot of extra work. Switching over to React Query, you'll find yourself with a lot less complexity. Interesting note about the classes thing. That is sort of something to take into consideration, but here's what I would say about that. So you don't want to just migrate a class component to a hook willy-nilly. It's on an as needed basis. And so if you're working through migrating some specific resource over from Redux to React Query, and you're working through it and things are going great, and then you hit a class component, you're like, oh shoot, back up everything, never mind, stop right there, don't back it up. It's actually quite easy to make this work. So let's find I don't think I have a classes example in here. Yeah, we'll just go down the bottom of this. And I've got a counter here. Okay, so let's say that you've got this and it accepts some props like this dot props increment or something. So now that's no longer in there. Okay, whatever it is. And you've got this function app that renders the counter. Oops. And then increment is like some doodad thing, whatever. Okay, so you're going along and you're like, oh shoot, no, I can't call use query in here because you can't use hooks inside of a component like this. So what you do instead is you say counter class, or I don't have a convention for this, like maybe counter impl. And then you make a component here called counter that takes props and it returns counter impl. Okay, and then it just spreads the props. Okay, we've just refactored. There's nothing special as far as the user is concerned. In your dev tools, you'll now see this counter and then counter impl, but that's the only difference between what we had before and what we have now. And so now, because you have a function component that can do this, now you can say use query, and you get your stuff from that, and then you say query stuff or whatever you'd want to call it. You could even call it use query, the use query prop. And then you could just say use query. That's interesting. I mean, maybe that's the way you want to do it. I don't know, however you want to do that. But it's actually pretty trivial to take a class component, not even touch it, and add a hook to it by just wrapping it with a function component that uses a hook. So that would not be a reason to not use React Query, because it's just quite easy to do that. You could probably even make a higher order component to make that work. Don't ask me about the typings. I don't know how you type that. But yeah, so that's what I would say there. And yeah, so I would definitely suggest, if you care about the long-term maintainability of that server state stuff in your Redux, then maybe slowly migrate each resource over to React Query over time. It's probably a good bet. Okay, so how do you test a component that makes an API call? Yeah, and this is actually kind of a tricky thing. If there's no UI change at all as a result of the API call, how do I, what do I wait for? So you've got in React testing library, the idea is the user clicks the button and then there's a loading spinner or something, and then the data shows up. And so you can make all of your assertions on the DOM. But if we're just like making a network request to report some user interaction, for example, like if you're doing you're testing an error thing, an error boundary that reports errors back to the backend or something, there's no UI that displays that. And so how do you make assertions? Like what do you assert on? So in that situation, I wish I probably have an example somewhere on GitHub in my like 700 repos on there. I don't know where to direct you for an example, but depending on what you're doing, you're probably mocking things out with MSW or something. So you could have a server.use for a specific, this test is going to make this request. And inside, I need to show you an example. I think I've got one in testingjavascript.com. I probably have one in Epic React too, but yeah, this is a problem for me. I like keeping track of where I put my examples of stuff is hard. Here, let's do MSW. It's in here somewhere. Nope. Yeah, it's not in here. It's probably in Epic React. I'll find it. I'm pretty sure it's in Epic React. It's in the testing one. Here, let's find MSW in here. Probably this one. Yeah, actually, it's probably on the extra credit. Okay, server.use. Here we go. Okay, here you go. So in my case, I'm not actually doing what I'm going to tell you that you could do, but you could do it this way. You could make this a mock function. Or let's see. Yeah, you can make that a mock function and then wait for that function to be called. You could also create a promise on the outside of this and then resolve that promise inside of here. So you do like a deferred, which actually I think I have a deferred function, yeah, right here. So you could borrow this function right here to create a promise that you can resolve on demand. So yeah, that's actually what's sort of what's going on in here is we can resolve this promise on demand, wait for it, and then continue with our test. So yeah, you could you could turn that into a mock function, or you could have a promise that you resolve on demand. You resolve it inside of this function and then continue. Another alternative is you could put your assertions directly in here and then just make sure, because this is in an asynchronous thing, you want to make sure that this actually runs. And so you could specify the number of assertions that you expect this test to actually run. I'm not a big fan of that approach. Another thing that you could do is have variables, and you could do some combinations of these, just saying a bunch of things that might be helpful. Let me just grab this and so I can edit some stuff. So you could say let request response, and then say request equals rec and response equals res. And then you would say, and then maybe like promise resolve or something right there, whatever it would, however you do that deferred thing. Or I guess it would probably be deferred dot resolve. Anyway, you'd say await deferred promise, and then you'd say expect the request to have whatever headers or whatever you want it to be, and expect the response, or yeah, you probably wouldn't need to assert on anything on the response side because that's you're writing that code as the tester. But the request, you could make some assertions there. Yeah, those are probably all the tips that I could give you right there. Good luck. That's kind of a fun one. It's kind of interesting. There's always something like you're if it's not visual, then you're probably mocking what's going on, or maybe we're talking about end-to-end tests, and so maybe it's not visual, but something probably gets updated in a database somewhere, and so then you just Cypress has the ability to exec like shell scripts, and so you could go and make sure that that was updated somewhere somehow. So yeah, there's always something that you can assert on. It's the trick is finding out.
Hi, Kent.
Yes. Hey, Peter.
I sent a link in Discord that I think that there's an
in general. There you go.
In general, sorry. Maybe the example here could be helpful.
Oh, yes. Yeah, you could do something just like this as well. Did I? That's funny that I totally forgot about this example. But yeah, this could be helpful as well. So that's in some ways similar, where we have this promise, but in this case we resolve it instantly, which will trigger our so when we type this and then we click on this, presumably this update username is going to wait for that promise to complete. And so like we can verify that this was updated, but it's probably going to trigger some UI state change or something. That's kind of what I envisioned with this example, is that we just need to make sure we wait for that state update to happen. And so here we are just going to wait for that promise. I don't have additional assertions hereafter, but probably in most cases, if you have a UI update, you probably should add those assertions. But yeah, maybe you don't have a UI update, and once you hit save, it just says okay, and it just the user hopes that it actually did save. You don't give any visual indication. But yeah, there are definitely situations where you don't give any visual indication of things being resolved. And all that this is going to do is it's going to say, wait for the next tick of the event loop is really what this amounts to. It's probably not the best approach right here, but it's better than literally just saying wait till the next tick of the event loop, because you're ensuring that the code that runs after this promise gets executed is going to run, and the component is going to be flushed, like all the effects will be flushed. And so at least that code runs, whatever that code ends up being. You don't really get any, because we're not asserting on what happens after this promise gets resolved, then you don't get any confidence on that. All you get is that, yes, it runs, and it doesn't throw an error when it does. So yeah, normally you'll want to have something specific to assert on. And that's where my example where you're asserting on the request can be helpful. I guess you could assert on the request in here as well, maybe, but yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but yeah, this is an okay approach as well. Just keep in mind, like, what are you, your assertions are where your confidence is coming from. If you don't have any assertions, all that you get is it doesn't throw an error when I do these things, which is helpful, but it's better to have some specific assertions. So, but yeah, thanks for sharing that, Peter. Okay, sweet. Moving right along. I keep forgetting, is it Lean or Leon? I'm sorry. I think it's Lean. How would you mock delete and post? I'm guessing that's post calls in MSW, or rather, how would you test it? Oh, I just answered. You're welcome. Yeah, Epic Reacts, the Bookshelf app especially, has a lot of MSW in it. And so you can explore what I do in there. MSW also just added a new data package that I'm looking forward to looking at, because that, yeah, there's some cool stuff in there that could probably replace a lot of my made up stuff that I did in the Bookshelf app. Yeah, so there is this request assertions recipe. I don't think I've seen this, so I'm going to take a look at this really quick. Yeah, so that including failure scenarios is a good idea. Yes, I also recommend this for sure. Yeah, I think that's conditional mocking. Oh yeah. Yeah, I think this is great. That's good stuff. So yeah, you want your MSW handler to resemble the real the thing that it's actually mocking as closely as possible, without going totally overboard and just rewriting your whole server in MSW. So yeah, I definitely, you'll notice in the Bookshelf app, my MSW handlers do have validity or failure scenarios. I check the validity of the requests and stuff, and that will make your tests a lot more resilient. So yeah, that's a great tip there. Sorry, Josh, I missed this. Let me find that. Yeah, there we go. Cool. Anyone know how I can test auth context dispatch is called correctly in my test? Existing test passing. Should I be testing? Okay, let's take a look. So we have this use mutation. I'm guessing that's a React query thing. Use auth context. Here's the dispatch for that. And dispatch is called on success of this logout. Okay, cool. First of all, I would just, as a tip for this, I wouldn't put this dispatch logout inside of the success handler as a logout. If that request fails, well, no, I guess that's right. I don't know. But part of me says just log the user out on the, like in the UI state immediately. But if that request does fail somehow, then I suppose that could be a problem. Like the user thinks they logged out and then they refresh and they're actually still logged in. So yeah, that could be a problem. Interesting. In what scenario would a logout fail? Yeah, I guess if they failed, like if it's a cookie session or something, if they fail to delete the cookie, then you think you logged out, but you actually didn't. And now people can come and steal your Facebook profile or something. Yeah, that wouldn't be good. Yeah, okay. I'm on board with this. Yep, that makes sense. Okay, so let's take a look at the test. We're rendering this hook. Okay, we're testing specifically use auth context, I'm guessing. Yeah. So then we say result current mutate. Oh, okay, no, we're testing this use logout mutation. Okay, so mutate. It looks like you're returning use mutation, which has mutate. Okay, that makes sense. Sorry. And we're waiting for that is success to be the case. That makes sense. And then we expect the data to be null. Sure. I don't know if that really matters all that much. I guess depending on what your API returns, but most of the time logouts don't care about the response data, so I wouldn't bother asserting on the response data. What you might want to assert on here is that well, I guess you don't have a UI. Yeah, you'd want to definitely assert that the local storage value got set to null for sure. Yeah, I don't know what there's going to be a state change that happens here that you might want to assert on that the UI state has been updated properly to reflect the fact that they're logged out. You don't normally assert on state. Normally you assert on the UI based on the state, but here you're testing a hook. And so in that case, the what matters is the state. I would add also, I should have prefaced all of this by saying, I probably wouldn't test this hook, not directly like this. What I would test is where this hook is used. You probably have a component that has a logout button. Click on that button, and then all of this becomes implementation detail. Even the local storage, sort of. Yeah, the trick is that for the user's experience, if that local storage auth token is not unset, or if it's not set to null and the user refreshes, then the browser might think, depending on the way that you've implemented your authentication, it might think that you're actually logged in and try to go get resources. And then assuming that this succeeded and you just forgot to clear out this local storage, those requests will fail, which could trigger some problems. So the fact that local storage item is set or unset is only partially an implementation detail. Well, technically it is an implementation detail, but it's one that you may need to assert on just because you're mocking out the HTTP calls and stuff. If you're not, if this is like an end-to-end test situation, then yeah, sure, you hit the logout button and then refresh and make sure that you're no longer logged in. And that would be like the ultimate way to do this, but that maybe be a little overboard for the level of coverage that you're looking for. So yeah, I think asserting on local storage would be a good idea, even if you switch from testing the hook directly to testing the UI and clicking on the button. So if I were testing all of this, I wouldn't bother testing the hook. I would test the code that's using the hook, so the component, and then I'd get all of this coverage. I would assert on the local storage state, and I would also assert on whatever UI is updated based on the state of this auth context, which would probably take you, well, and you even history push over to the homepage. So you go to that homepage and just make sure that you're not in the authenticated state for the app. I'm making the assumption that there's a difference on the homepage and whether you're logged in or not. If there's not, if it's just like homepage is the unauthenticated experience, whether you're authenticated or not, then you may need to add an additional, let's try to click on or navigate to a page that's that is authenticated and make sure we can't get there or something. It may be a little bit over testing, but that's just something to think about. We're always thinking about like confidence. Am I getting the confidence that I want out of that? So yeah, I missed a comment here, Josh. Let me make sure I didn't miss something. Yeah, okay. I think I covered all that, Josh, hopefully. Hopefully that was helpful and interesting. You can test the hook if you want to. Just keep in mind that if you're going to test the hook directly, then you need to assert on the hook's state or on the context state. And that also means that your refactors of things are more likely to break your tests. And so they don't give you as much confidence as you might hope. Okay, I've got 4 minutes. Any other questions left in here before I take off? Getting some typing. I'll close down a couple browser tabs. There's no real way to test that dispatch was called. I mean, what you could do is, if you want to assert that dispatch was called, you can do that. Keep in mind that if you assert on the state of the auth context, which I'm guessing shouldn't be super difficult, right? Because you have this use auth context that's going to give you back that state. So you would just call that in another. Yeah, how would you do that? I guess what you would need to do to be able to do this is you'd, inside of this render hook, you would call 2 hooks, which you can totally do that. In fact, you could just return an array, use the logout mutation and use auth context. And then this result would be that array. You could destructure each one, and then you can make assertions on that. So yeah, if you're asserting on the state, then you don't need to worry about whether dispatch was called, because the state won't be updated unless it is. And so you're getting that confidence anyway. Now, if you really just want to assert dispatch is called, and here's what it's called with, that's getting really low level. I don't think that's a very useful test, but if that's what you want to do, then you can mock out use auth context, and that's what you would do. Whatever module that's in, you say just.mock that module, provide it a fake version of use auth context, and then you return a mocked version of auth context dispatch or dispatch, and then assert that it's called properly. But I wouldn't bother with that. You're really poking tons of holes in reality doing that. And it just makes your test more likely to break, and more likely to break when it's not supposed to, and more likely to not break when it is supposed to. So that just brings up in my mind this blog post. It's yeah, good one. Okay, sweet. As Josh wraps up with the last little bit here, I'm just going to say thanks everybody. It's been fun. Yeah, you wouldn't get that. So because they'd be in different parts of the tree, or entirely different trees. So yeah, you wouldn't find any docs on this because that's not a usual thing that you would do. But if you think about it, a hook is just a function that calls other hooks. And so as far as render hook is concerned, it doesn't know what your code is doing. All it knows is that you're calling, or it's calling your stuff in the context of another component. And so inside of that callback, you can do anything that you can do in a component. You could call React use state in there or whatever. And so, yeah, the fact that you're returning an array is irrelevant. I don't know if there are type definitions, but you may run into a problem if you're typing your tests. And in that case, what you could do is just make another hook that use test hook, and then you just call that, and it would return an array. But I doubt that even with TypeScript, you would run into problems there, because it should allow you to return anything you like. So anyway, good luck, everybody. This was fun. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next week. I think I'm still have mixed feelings about working on Saturdays and taking my day off on Fridays. But yeah, for the time being, Saturdays are the day that we're going to do this. And yeah, we'll see how long that goes.